Scott has been supporting you until now, but I won't let that happen anymore. A jobless NEET should leave. This was my house, and the ones who should leave were my eldest son and his wife, the real jobless NEETs. But my daughter-in-law seemed oblivious to that. This is my house. Why should I leave? Feel free to take Scott with you. 2 weeks later, my eldest son, who was supposed to have returned to his in-laws, showed up at my house. My name is Dora, 72 years old. My hobby is karaoke. I never had any interest in karaoke, but after being invited by my part-time colleagues, I got hooked. Now it's my daily pleasure to go singing with them after work. Since my husband Scott passed away a few years ago, I had been living alone. But now I'm living with my son, Scott. Scott, 43, married Kiera, his same-aged partner, last year. They had been living in Kiera's parents' home as per her wish. However, last week, Scott came home and said, "I'm separating from Kiera." I thought they might have had a fight, but the reason was much more serious. A few months ago, Scott quit his previous job for career advancement and joined a new company, which turned out to be a dark company with unexpected and unpaid overtime. He was harassed daily by a nepotism-based superior and was increasingly exhausted by stress and overwork until he developed mental health issues. If only Kiera had noticed Scott's worsening condition, things might have been different. Despite returning home exhausted from daily overtime, Kiera never once asked, "Are you okay?" When Scott mentioned quitting, Kiera said, "What about money if you quit? Even with the unpaid overtime, the salary is higher than your previous job, so it's fine." Kiera, a homemaker in name, didn't keep up with the housework. Yet she insisted Scott keep working while she spent his earnings on outings. Reaching his limits, Scott visited a psychiatrist who advised quitting his job. Knowing Kiera would rage if she found out, Scott didn't tell her about quitting and came to me for help instead. I suggested a divorce, but he's too weak physically and mentally to consider it now and just asked to stay at my place for a while. While I wished Scott would divorce such a wife, I respected his decision. I agreed to let Scott live with me. However, we needed a plausible reason for Scott staying here to tell Kiera. After discussing with Scott, we concocted a story that I had injured my leg and couldn't live alone. We planned to tell Kiera that he should move in with me to help out, and he could commute to work from here. I wasn't injured. At over 70, I was still working. But we had to convince Kiera somehow. I needed to ensure Kiera didn't find out I was still working. If she learned I was working, she might forcibly take Scott back without discussion, hurling harsh words at him. A scenario easy to imagine. Until Scott recovered, we had to keep up this charade. So I told Scott, "You've been through a lot, so now you should rest at home." Saying this, I continued to leave for work every day. Scott met Kiera on weekends to update her on his situation, ensuring she didn't suspect anything. Though Scott was still visiting a psychiatrist, I worried about Kiera's harsh words affecting him. If I didn't see Kiera at all, she'd probably storm here. "I can't burden you further. I'll be fine." He reassured me and went to meet Kiera on weekends. But about a month after Scott moved in, Kiera finally came to our house. It was my day off, so I was at home. Hearing the doorbell, I checked the camera, saw Kiera, informed Scott, then went to open the front door. "Long time no see, Dora." Kiera approached without a hint of a friendly smile, glaring at me as she spoke. "It's been almost a month since Scott came to take care of you, Dora. Isn't your leg injury getting any better?" I could hear her inner voice, not caring about me but eager to take Scott back home. "Yes, that's right. I still can't do without the crutches." I glanced at the crutches I was holding. They were once used by my husband and had been in the house ever since. "I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused you because of my injury. It really is a bother, Dora. You say your leg is injured, but you're not bedridden, are you? Stop taking advantage of Scott's kindness." I was taken aback by the directness of my daughter-in-law's accusation. The audacity of Kiera, who didn't care about Scott and spent his money on her outings, to blame me was unthinkable. That day, she left after about 30 minutes of complaints, but then she started calling frequently. Worried about seeming suspicious if I didn't answer, I explained the situation to my workplace and they allowed me to work while on calls. However, it was honestly a huge inconvenience. Every day, Kiera would call to say, "Isn't your leg healed yet? Stop depending on Scott." Give Scott back, she even demanded. I had so much I wanted to retort, but each time I held back, thinking of Scott's face and enduring Kiera's complaints. However, the daily calls were gradually becoming a source of stress for me. Holding my mobile phone, I sat on the living room sofa, sighing deeply. Despite not trying to show my fatigue in front of Scott, it seemed I couldn't hide it anymore. Seeing me, Scott apologized with a look of regret. Mom, I'm sorry about Kiera. You're busy with work, and here I am, a grown man, still relying on you. It's pathetic. I shook my head, thinking it wasn't his fault. It's okay. You've had a hard time at your previous job, so now it's my turn to take care of you. Just rest for now. Although I reassured him, Scott opened his laptop, insisting on finding a job soon. Knowing he was advised to continue counseling, I urged him not to rush and to take his time recovering. Thanks, Mom. I'm so glad you're my mother. Scott's grateful smile warmed my heart. I'm also glad you're my son, I conveyed warmly. To outsiders, my life might seem difficult, but no matter his age, Scott is my child. As a mother, it's natural for me to want to help my child. His happiness is my happiness. Kiera's calls continued, but I began to brush them off. One day, I returned home without notifying Scott of my arrival time. Usually after work, I would send a message to Scott, ask him what he'd like for dinner, and then go shopping before heading home. But that day, I decided to visit a restaurant for the first time in a while and bought Scott's favorite takeout to bring home. Moreover, since it was a direct return from a client meeting, I arrived home quite early, thinking Scott might still be at his psychiatric appointment. I entered the entrance and saw unfamiliar women's shoes. At that moment, I was struck by an unpleasant sensation. Could it be that Kiera found out Scott had quit his job and was lying about staying here? With that thought, I hurried to the living room, but the female voice I heard wasn't Kiera's. Well, I guess I should head back now. Aw, come on, stay a little longer. Mom's still at work and won't be back yet. Let's hang out some more. I stood, frozen, listening to their laughter and cheerful conversation, bewildered. What was happening? My mind couldn't catch up. But it's not fair to your mom. She thinks you're still going to the hospital, right? And here you are, all well. Mothers are happy when they can do something for their kids. Besides, I came to stay with her, who was living alone and lonely. It's like a filial duty. But don't you plan to find a job and keep living like this? Nah, I'm telling Mom I'm still going to the psychiatrist and plan to stay here without working. I'm thinking of divorcing Kiera too, so we can be together always. Ew, a guy without money is such a turnoff. Once Mom passes away, I'll inherit her savings, so money won't be an issue. Ugh, what a terrible son. And when will that be? Hearing their laughter, I quietly left the house, locking the door behind me. I went to a nearby cafe and messaged Scott that I would be home soon. I imagined Scott hurriedly sending the woman away. Reflecting on Scott's words, I wondered if he really said that. Once Mom's gone, I'll inherit her savings, so there will be money. Could those really have been Scott's words? The claim of attending psychiatric sessions was also a lie. His seemingly remorseful behavior was all a facade. I'm glad you're my mother. Were those words meant to praise me for being gullible and overly indulgent with my son? Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't stop crying in front of others, something I hadn't done since my husband passed away. After a while, I returned home as if nothing happened. Scott, feigning concern as usual, greeted me. His cheerful demeanor from earlier seemed like a lie. While thinking this, I handed Scott the takeout from the restaurant. Oh, this is my favorite from back in the day. He appeared happy, but I wasn't fooled by his smile anymore. Then I called Kiera. Your frequent calls are really bothering me. It's causing me stress. I don't want to end up in the hospital because of your call, so please don't contact me again. After saying my piece, I hung up, feeling slightly relieved for having expressed my pent-up feelings. Within 30 minutes, the doorbell rang. Pleased that they reacted just as I expected, I opened the front door. There stood Kiera, her face red with anger, glaring and shouting at me. Please come in, don't disturb the neighbors. As Kiera entered the living room, Scott, eating takeout, looked at her in surprise, fork in hand. Scott, what are you doing? Leisurely eating takeout. Scott, clueless, looked fearfully between Kiera and me. If my calls are stressing you out, I won't call anymore, but in exchange, I'm taking Scott back. You've been living off him, but no more. The jobless NEET needs to leave. Her words were contradictory as usual, demanding Scott back and then telling him to leave. This is my house. If anyone should leave, it's the Scott couple, fitting the description of jobless neats, though Kiera seemed unaware of that. Scott appeared quite panicked in the face of Kiera's raging temper. Behind Kiera, he mouthed to me, asking what happened. Ignoring him, I said cheerfully, "Why should I leave my own house? Feel free to take Scott with you. My leg is just fine." I jumped on the spot to prove my point. Kiera, slightly taken aback by my words but seemingly pleased at the offer to take Scott, said, "Then I'll take Scott, but don't expect any help from us in the future. Not even if you're injured or hospitalized. Manage your finances yourself and don't contact Scott. Scott, don't answer her calls." After saying her piece, she pulled Scott's arm and left. Scott looked back at me with a tearful expression until the entrance door closed. But for a 43-year-old son who lied easily and wished for his mother's death, I felt no desire to help him anymore. In the now quiet room, I sat in front of my husband's photo and spoke to it. Is it my fault that Scott turned out like this? Images of Scott as a sweet child flashed through my mind. Tears rolled down my cheeks again. Unable to sleep that night, I woke up to find it was morning and decided to take the day off of work. After packing Scott's belongings into cardboard boxes and clearing the room, I felt much lighter. I returned to work the next day, ready to resume my normal life. However, 2 weeks later, Scott, who was supposed to have gone back to his in-laws, showed up at my house. "What are you doing here?" "Mom, it's terrible." There was Scott, 43 years old, crying and screaming at the entrance. Embarrassed by the neighbors, I sighed and let him come up. "So why are you here? Why did you suddenly become so cold? You're supposed to be on my side, aren't you?" Listening to Scott, it seemed that Kiera was initially happy to have him back, but didn't take her long to realize he was unemployed. Since then, Scott was subjected to daily verbal abuse. He had even been deprived of his mobile phone, unable to contact anyone. "Still going to the psychiatrist? Don't you feel sorry for me?" "No, I don't feel sorry for you at all. You said you were going to the psychiatrist, but that was a lie, right?" Scott looked at me in surprise. He might be good at lying, but not at keeping secrets. "No, it's not a lie. I went last week." His eyes darted around, making it obvious he was lying. "Then show me your medical appointment card." I don't have it with me right now. Wait, are you doubting me, Mom? I'm your son." Just then, the doorbell rang, and I opened the front door, suspecting who it might be, and sure enough, it was her. "Scott's here right now." "What? Angelica?" "Hey there." It was Scott's mistress, Angelica. After Scott left our house, Angelica had visited once, asking for Scott's whereabouts since she couldn't contact him. I was surprised she had the nerve to ask me, his mother, but I told her Scott would likely be coming home soon. What timing for her to show up. "Why is Angelica here?" "Your mom said you might be here soon, so I decided to visit. Lucky me, you're actually here." "No, I mean, what?" "Your mom knows about us, and that you're not really going to the hospital. And that Scott wants my savings and wishes I'd hurry up and pass away." Scott's face turned pale. From his mouth came feeble words like, "That's not true," and "I care about you, Mom." But none of it resonated with me anymore. Everything about the old company and going to the psychiatrist was true. Only for the first visit, though. Scott tried to silence Angelica, but by then, such stories didn't matter to me. "So you've been lying to me all this time. I don't want to live with someone who lies so easily." I said this and kicked them out. That same day, Scott, Kiera, and Angelica showed up at my house together, all three looking disheveled and injured. It seemed Kiera had found out about the affair, but I couldn't fathom why they'd come to my house. "I want nothing more to do with you." I let them in only because they were making a scene outside. "Dora, you knew everything, right? That Scott quit his job and was cheating with this woman?" "Yes, that's right." "And you said nothing? I'm divorcing Scott. I'll demand compensation from these two. Since Scott's jobless, Dora, you should pay. It's only fair, right? You're his mother and you knew about his affair." Why should I, at my age, pay for my over 40-year-old son Scott's mistakes? As I was about to argue, Angelica dropped a bombshell. "But you were using Scott's money to go to host clubs. I accidentally saw you leaving one." "What? No, Host clubs? You were wasting the money I worked so hard to earn on host clubs? You, who have been cheating, are hardly in any position to say anything." "Wow, scary. No wonder Scott doesn't want to go back to you." Kiera's face turned even more demonic as she and Angelica began fighting furiously. Scott tried to intervene but ended up getting hit by both of them. Watching this, I called Kiera's parents. About 30 minutes later, the house intercom rang and I went to open the entrance door. Kiera's parents were at the entrance. While we were exchanging greetings, Kiera's yelling and loud noises could be heard from the other room. I invited them inside and explained the situation. As they entered, the chaos in the living room halted abruptly. Mom? Dad? Kiera's parents apologized to me, then sternly took her away. Scott clung to me, begging, but I firmly sent him and Angelica away too. Thus, the tumultuous chapter involving Scott, Kiera, and Angelica came to an end, and I regained my peaceful life. Later, Scott and his wife returned to his in-laws' home with them. However, after the in-laws found out about Scott's infidelity and Kiera's visits to host clubs, they reportedly became angry and kicked him out of the house. Kiera, having been kicked out and with nowhere else to turn, reportedly decided not to divorce Scott. Instead, they rented an apartment and continued living together. Scott, left with little choice, tried to find another job but was unsuccessful. He ended up working part-time at a convenience store near their home. However, he was constantly berated by Kiera every day, and now his mental state has deteriorated to the point where he can hardly function. It seems he's currently undergoing treatment at a psychiatric clinic. Scott, struggling to find a job, ended up working part-time at a convenience store near my house. I've been ignoring Kiera's pleas for help. She needs to learn the hard way after living off others' money and indulging in host clubs without working a day. Now that peace of mind has returned, I'm back to enjoying karaoke with my part-time job friends, something I had stopped doing since Scott's arrival. I couldn't go out and enjoy myself knowing that Scott was suffering, and also to avoid Kiera finding out about my leisure activities. Dora, I can't believe you can sing such modern songs. I have to learn from my grandkids, but it's hard to keep up. While I was singing a popular song of the time, that's what one of my part-time colleagues told me. I learned about the song from my grandson, who was the child of my second son and his spouse, and I've been practicing it. I've promised to go karaoke with my grandchildren the next time they visit. I'm practicing trendy songs, imagining their surprised faces.
Get out! I'm going to live with her. I was stunned by Sean's sudden loud declaration. Behind Sean, I saw Kathy smirking. Probably, Kathy had persuaded Sean to take this action. Regaining my composure, I thought for a moment and responded. I was glad I had been suspicious and investigated. I had already started moving towards divorce, so Sean choosing Kathy didn't matter to me. But their naivety was astounding. Telling me to leave, how dare they? Fortunately, I have a strong ally. I'm going to teach these two a lesson about reality. My name is Margot McLean, a 30-year-old office worker. I met my husband, Sean, at the same company we worked at. Sean, from a different department, worked in sales while I was in planning. We first met at the company-wide welcome party for new employees. We happened to sit next to each other and hit it off, exchanging contacts then and there. A few months later, he asked me to go out, but I was new and too busy learning my job to think about dating. Sean said, "I'll wait until you are ready." 2 years had passed, and by then, I had become quite proficient at my job. On my 24th birthday, when we went out for dinner together, we decided to have a relationship. Sean was very handsome, and dating him made me the envy of many. After 3 years of dating, he proposed, and we got married. I lived alone in a house, and Sean moved in with me. I have a close sister. Her name is Mina Turner, a designer currently working overseas. I told Mina about living with Sean. Mina, who couldn't come to our wedding, said, "Then I'll send a gift to your home," and she gave me clothes she designed. Since living with Sean, Mina has returned home twice, but hasn't met Sean due to scheduling conflicts. She kept saying that I'll definitely meet him someday. We agreed that I would become a homemaker once we had children, but for now, we were both working hard. Recently, however, Sean's behavior changed. He used to always refuse business trips, but now he went on them frequently and started coming home late from drinking. Sometimes he wouldn't come home at all after a night out. When I asked where he stayed, he would only say it to friends. Thinking about why he started acting this way, I remembered hearing rumors. Rumors were about a woman named Kathy, who started working. Kathy was very cute and seemed like the kind of woman men would want to protect. Perhaps because of this, she wasn't well liked by the female employees. Kathy was known for her numerous rumors involving men. She was close to Sean, and rumors were that Kathy was targeting him. At the time, I thought these were baseless rumors and ignored them. But now that I think about it, Sean started coming home late around the time those rumors began. Feeling uneasy, I was in the lounge when Kathy walked in. It felt awkward, so I decided to leave and then noticed the scent of her perfume. I remembered that Sean had recently bought a similar perfume. Whether it was a coincidence or because of the rumors, I started feeling sick. As I passed by Kathy on my way to the restroom, she laughed at me. That moment turned my suspicions into convictions, but I lacked proof. I decided to gather evidence of Sean's infidelity. The day before Sean said he was going on a business trip, I asked a reliable supervisor at work if Sean was really going. It turned out Sean had taken 3 days off. My supervisor asked, "Isn't Sean's mom unwell? Aren't you taking any time off?" To which I responded with a denial. I hadn't heard about my mother-in-law being sick, and she seemed fine when I last called. After discussing my suspicion that Sean might be cheating with my supervisor, I was given the same days off as Sean. I used those 3 days to follow Sean. When I got home early, Sean asked, "What happened to your car?" I lied that it was having issues, so I borrowed a replacement, and he believed me without question. In reality, anticipating Sean would use the car, I had rented one the day before and left my car at my parents' house. The next day, as expected, Sean left in the car, and I discreetly followed him. He headed to an apartment. I waited in a position where I could see the entrance. Of course, I was ready to take evidence photos with my phone. Sean either had a key or the door was unlocked, as he entered by himself. An hour later, the door opened again, and I saw Sean and Kathy come out. Sean had gone to Kathy's apartment. I was prepared, but seeing the happy couple in front of me, I couldn't hold back my tears. Then they got into the car and drove off, so I followed them. They headed to a jewelry shop. I parked a little far in a parking lot and entered the shop. I had disguised myself just in case, which allowed me to follow them. They were looking at rings, and from eavesdropping, it seemed they were selecting an engagement ring. Sean, already married, what was he thinking? I was irritated. They chose an expensive-looking diamond ring. Afterward, they went to a fancy French restaurant. I couldn't enter as I didn't have a reservation, but managed to capture them arm in arm entering the restaurant. I waited for them to come out and continued following. They returned to Kathy's apartment and didn't come out until morning, so I stayed at a nearby hotel. The next morning, I was on standby early but only saw them leave the house once. They came out together, holding hands, and went to the nearby store, then quickly returned home. On the third day, they hardly left the house except for brief trips to the store, but I managed to take quite a few photos. Still feeling it wasn't enough, I hired a detective agency. A few weeks later, the results from the agency arrived, and all that was left was to bring up the divorce. As I was wondering how to bring up the topic, Sean returned home from his so-called business trip, which was actually an affair. I told him as soon as he got back, "We need to talk later. I just got home, you know? I can't talk now. I was about to go to sleep." "What about dinner and a shower?" "I have already done them. You know, talking to you just irritates me. Can you only talk to me when I'm in a good mood?" "Margot, you've really aged. You don't even bother with makeup at home, it's like you've given up being a woman." Laughing, Sean returned to his bedroom. I was irritated. Everyone ages, and it's okay to be without makeup at home. Besides, how was I supposed to know when he was in a good mood? For now, I decided to drop the divorce talk, take a shower, and go to bed. The next day, after finishing work on time, I hoped I could finally have the conversation. To my surprise, Sean came home much earlier than usual. The heavy footsteps in the hallway and the unusual air about him made me uneasy. The next moment, he burst into the living room. "I'm going to live with her, so get out." I was stunned by Sean's sudden loud declaration. Behind Sean, I saw Kathy smirking mischievously. Probably, Kathy had convinced Sean to act this way. Trying to stay calm, I asked Sean for a reason.
Why? What happened all of a sudden?
Kathy, she only has 6 months to live. I want to spend as much time as possible with her, to create memories. She said she always wanted to live in a house like this. So, Margot, you need to leave. Kathy stuck out her tongue from behind Sean. I was infuriated by her actions, but then got an idea for a satisfying revenge. Telling them to wait, I went to the bedroom to get something I had prepared. When I returned to the living room, they looked puzzled. I said, fine, thinking this isn't my house anyway. Great, Sean. Sorry, Margot, for taking your husband. It's okay, it's okay. So, Sean, can you sign this right away? I said, handing him the divorce papers, and Sean looked a bit bewildered. However, Kathy urged him, saying hurry up and sign it, and Sean reluctantly signed the divorce papers. After confirming the signature, I showed them the compensation agreement prepared by my lawyer. They were shocked. Sean asked, why did you prepare this? But I was ready for divorce anyway, so it was only natural. I demanded $60,000 from Sean. Sean agreed to the amount. Kathy was clearly unhappy.
I only have 6 months to live, and you're demanding compensation from a poor girl like me? You're a monster!
Poor girl? Okay, let's do this. If you're still alive after 6 months, then I'll demand the compensation then, and it'll be $1 million. How about that? I made a bold proposal to Kathy. Later on, I requested the lawyer to proceed with our divorce. I was profoundly grateful that I had recorded the conversation about the divorce on my cell phone for evidence. After all, evidence is crucial. Since I'm off tomorrow, I'll pack up and leave the day after tomorrow. Oh, and don't worry, I'll file the divorce papers right after this. So, this meeting is over now. Hurry up and leave, I said, concluding the discussion. Sean and Kathy left hand in hand, looking cozy together. I started packing as soon as I got home and called my sister Mina. She found my strategy amusing and said, that sounds interesting. I always knew she was a great sister. Mina was planning to return from abroad in 6 months, so we decided to carry out the revenge then. The next day at work, everyone was talking about us. The rumor was that Kathy had finally snatched a married man. Unable to bear their sympathetic glances, I went to another room to get some materials for the day. When I opened the door and turned on the light, there was Sean and Kathy. Kathy was clinging to Sean, and they froze when they saw me. I quickly took a photo with my cell phone and left the room. Then, I rushed to report the incident to my supervisor and showed the photo. My supervisor was furious, knowing about the affair. Soon after, the two of them were called to the president's office with me. As I told everything, Sean tried to explain away the incident in the room as a misunderstanding. However, the company had recently installed cameras in each room that could capture clear footage even in the dark, and of course, there was footage from the room. With no way out, Sean faced a cancellation of raise. Kathy couldn't renew her contract. Sean, unable to bear the scrutiny, resigned voluntarily. Finally, I could return to a peaceful life. 6 months later, I was at the airport to pick up Mina. We reunited and chatted on our way back to my former home. Mina used her key to enter the house. As we walked in, I stayed behind Mina, recording everything.
You! What are you doing entering someone else's house?
This is my house, though? I joined in. Hey there.
Marco?
Yes, this is my sister's house. Didn't you know? Indeed, the house belonged to my sister Mina. I had been living there at Mina's request to take care of it while she was away. That's why I reported to Mina when I started living with Sean, and she gave her permission. Moreover, the utility bills were automatically paid from Mina's account. It was a thoughtful arrangement Mina made for my convenience. Had Sean not realized he hadn't been paying for utilities all this time? Normally, I think they'd notice right away, but maybe they're just daydreaming. Even so, Kathy had been living alone, so she should have known about utilities. But the fact that she didn't realize it is beyond surprising. It's actually hilarious. I brought a copy of the half-year statement since you and Margot divorced. Wonder how much it adds up to. Let's see, including the alimony, the amount to buy this house would be $500,000, right? Sean is shocked looking at the statement. Hearing our voices, Kathy comes out of the bedroom.
Why are you here? And who is that woman?
Oh, this is my sister Mina. Besides, it's Mina's house, so it's not odd for the owner to be here, right? You look well, that's good. Now you can pay the money. As I say that, Kathy mutters "oh no" under her breath. Sean says, I don't have such a large sum as $500,000. Then, should I sue you for trespassing? I pretend to call the police. Sean hastily says he'll figure something out. Just then, the doorbell rings. It seems the lawyer I called has arrived.
Since we're here, let's have a detailed discussion with the lawyer present.
The lawyer who helped me during my divorce seemed to have a good grasp of the situation. When the lawyer handed Sean the official documents, he visibly slumped in disappointment. Kathy starts to get angry again.
I didn't know this wasn't Sean's house. I was told it was his, so I just lived here.
Well, it doesn't really matter. Let's have Sean pay up. Kathy was making a fuss, saying she made no such promise and there's no proof, and that $60,000 is too much. So, I played the recording of our conversation from 6 months ago. See, there's your proof, I say, and she can't say anything back. Sean suddenly realizes something.
By the way, Kathy, you mentioned earlier about having only 6 months to live. What's that about?
Kathy tries to change the subject.
Okay. We'll pay, just leave.
With that, we quickly leave. Sean ends up buying the house from Mina, but considering the amount, he decides to sell it instead. About a month later, Sean visited my parents' house. I hesitate but decide to open the door, thinking it could be interesting.
Glad you're home. I wanted to talk to Margot. Is that okay?
Sure. If it's here, that's fine. Make it quick. So, what's up? Sean's story boils down to him claiming he was deceived and wasn't in the wrong. He initially refused Kathy's advances, but ended up getting involved with her after going out for drinks just once. He said the relationship just kind of dragged on from there and he felt powerless to stop it. I see, so you couldn't help it. Poor you.
You understand, Margot?
No, I don't. People who really couldn't help it wouldn't act like this. I showed him the photos I took when I followed him. Sean falls silent. After a while, Sean starts talking again, as if remembering something.
Right, I didn't want a divorce. It was Kathy's fault, that was the part one couldn't help.
I ask why he didn't want to divorce, and Sean starts explaining. Kathy was a cute affair partner. It seems she had a terminal illness with only 6 months to live and was going to leave Sean. So, Sean's plan was to not divorce and spend those 6 months with Kathy, then come back to me. Hearing this gave me the creeps. I seriously wondered if a few screws were loose in his head. Then, unexpectedly, Kathy, who shouldn't know where my parents' house is, showed up.
Sean! I knew you'd be here with this woman. I've got a GPS app, so finding this place was easy. What do you think you're doing, running away from me? Do you realize what's gonna happen?
Apparently, Sean had fled to my place to escape from Kathy. He tried to run away after finding out her terminal illness was a lie, but Kathy was clingy and wouldn't let him go. He came to me crying about it. Seeing this, Kathy flew into a rage and, for some reason, grabbed my arm and started complaining.
It's all your fault. You're the one who demanded alimony and schemed about the house. It's creepy how you're trying to take my man too. You've messed up my life.
How about not passing the buck? Weren't you and Sean the ones who hurt me first? If that's the case, you can't complain about getting a taste of your own medicine, right? You hurt my life, so it's only fair. Kathy's tone got nastier as she heated up. In the middle of our argument, Sean stepped in to stop us.
Stop fighting over me.
No, we're not. What are you misunderstanding? Even if asked, I wouldn't want a guy like you. If you two would just leave and stop bothering me. Sean looked stunned at my words. He probably thought I was still hung up on him. The thought of how delusional he was made me want to laugh. I was so tired of all this that I said I would call the police, and they left as if running away. I thought I'd avoid any further involvement, but Sean was stubborn. The next day, after work, there was Sean with a bouquet of flowers in front of my office. "Why are you here?"
Margot! Marry me again!
He shouted so loudly that everyone gathered around. I was so embarrassed I felt like my face was on fire. I tried to ignore him and leave, but Sean grabbed my arm and held me back.
I said it was impossible yesterday. Did you forget already? I'm amazed. Don't do this. I mean, I told you not to bother me ever again.
Sean didn't seem to give up, and he kept holding my arm. Just then, someone pulled him away from me. It was Mina.
I secretly came back here, and I thought I'd surprise you by picking you up from work, but I'm really glad I came back.
Mina? Oh, Mina, I've fallen for you. I don't need Margot. I want you. So, marry me. I'll follow you anywhere, even overseas. Sean said, holding both of Mina's hands. Everyone around, including me and Mina, were taken aback by Sean's actions. Mina said it hurt, but Sean didn't let go of her hands. I instinctively shouted, "Dangerous." But it was too late. Mina suddenly flipped Sean over her shoulder. I hadn't mentioned it, but Mina used to train. Her sharp movements were still impressive. I was admiring them, thinking how dangerous she looked when her expression changed. That's when the police, alerted by the commotion, showed up. They seemed confused by the scene of a man down and a woman standing. Anyway, Sean was taken away by the police. That's when Sean finally shouted his true feelings. I don't care whether it's Margot or Mina. I just need someone to pay off my debts for me. Even after selling the house, there's still a debt of $400,000. I don't know what to do. I'll take anyone who'll pay it off for me. Please. As Sean was led away, Mina and I watched him go with cold eyes. The onlookers were saying things like, "That's just wrong, too much, and that lady is so cool." To ensure such an incident never happened again, Mina and I went to the police to request a restraining order. During Mina's stay, we decided to move out of my parents' house and into a high-security condo. Kathy, realizing that Sean had publicly proposed to me and not her, decided to leave him. That made sense. Why stay with a cheating man who doesn't value you, especially with nearly $400,000 in debt remaining? Kathy seemed to have woken up to reality, but she hadn't learned her lesson. She didn't want to work and was looking for a wealthy person to marry and dump the debt on. She even persistently pursued a married wealthy man in town despite being rejected. Eventually, his wife found out and had a restraining order issued against Kathy. Undeterred, Kathy's attempts became more aggressive. She even broke into a house through a window and tried to steal valuables, only to be caught when the security company arrived. Kathy ended up being taken care of by the police for a while. As for Sean, after pulling off such a stunt, he couldn't stay in the area and went back to his hometown, only to be disowned by his parents. His relatives, knowing the situation, also cut ties with him, and eventually, his friends did the same after he asked them for money. Left alone, Sean started working in a factory. He is living there but still trapped in a mountain of debt. He occasionally called me with an anonymous number, so I recently got a new phone. Now, I can finally enjoy some peace in my daily life. Since then, life has been truly peaceful, and I've even found someone I like at work. Mina is still thriving overseas, and although she only comes back occasionally, we sisters are as close as ever. I love my cool and reliable sister Mina so much. She's my pride and joy. I hope we can continue to get along without fighting, and maintain a good relationship.